part 4, we're going to be playing a piece by J.S. Bach entitled Arioso in G. There's a few rhythmic complications in this piece and also a few new ideas which I'd like to introduce. The first one is the idea of a key signature. Now, rather than getting into a great detailed explanation at this point, I'm going to give you a very simple explanation and later on we'll go into more detail. If you look right at the beginning, after the treble clef, you'll see a sharp sign on the top line. Now that line, if we had a note on it, would be an F note. So what that sharp signifies is that every F note that you come across is played F sharp. In other words, F natural doesn't exist in this piece unless it has a natural sign in front of it, which would cancel out what the key signature implies. So every F that you come across will be played F sharp. This is the key of G. Now, rather than explaining why it's the key of G, I'll leave that for now. Simply know that it is the key of G, which has one sharp. In fact, whether you know it's in G or not, it's not going to affect how you play the piece. But you have to realize that the Fs are sharp. That will affect how you play the piece. So keep in mind, not only the sharp on that line, in other words, not only this F, but this F on the third string and the F on the sixth string. Sixth, fourth, and first string. Those are all played F sharp. So you might find yourself confused at the beginning because you'll see an F note. There won't be a sharp in front of it. You'll just have to remember that every time there's an F note, it's played sharp, F sharp. If you see a natural sign in front of the F, then you play it F natural. All other cases, it's F sharp. Rhythmically speaking, there's a few difficulties, perhaps. It's a fairly complex piece rhythmically and basically sums up everything that we've been talking about as far as 16th notes, 8th notes, tied notes. And you'll probably find most of the combinations, and a few you haven't seen yet, introduced in this piece. You might find it beneficial, rather than sitting down with your guitar right at the beginning and playing through the entire piece, in which case you'll be concerned with getting the right pitches, using the right fingers, plus trying to figure out rhythmically what's going on. You might sit down, perhaps you might even want to write it out with just any random pitch, or not even a pitch, but just stems with beams or whatever. And just simply clap the piece or play it on an open string or hum it just to get the rhythmic idea reinforced in your mind. I think that'll simplify it because once you have the rhythmic idea, then you can forget it. That'll just be sort of second nature and you can concentrate on the technical aspects and getting the correct pitch. So let's just look at a few of the bars and I'll explain a few of the new concepts. In the first bar, we have a half note which is tied to a group of 4 eighth notes. So those eighth notes are beamed together. Now how you would count that would be that the half note would get 2 beats. So we count the 1, 2, and because it's tied to another B note, a B note, an eighth note B note this time, you wouldn't play anything on the third beat. That half note would simply keep on ringing. On the second half of that beat, you would play the C. So 3, there would be nothing. 3, and. On and, you would play the C. So that bar would sound like 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1. You'll see that the C was played on the and after the third beat. In bar 3, we have a slightly different arrangement. On the third beat, we have a C quarter note. This time tied to a group of 4 16th notes. If you remember, it takes 4/16 notes to make one complete beat. So how you could count that would be to count the 3 and 4 and. In this case, there won't be anything on the 4th beat because that C is tied to the first 16th note. However, now we have 3 beats left or 3 notes left to play in the remainder of that beat. So we're going to have the first one's going to be coming before the and, the second one on the and the last one after the and. The easiest way to perhaps do it is to play all 4 notes at first. In other words, play the C note, which gets 1 beat, 1, and then play the 4 notes that would come in the last beat, the 4/16 notes. So if I just, for instance, I'll just play a C note. I won't play the actual pitches. For example, if I played that rhythm for you, it would sound like this. I'll count 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1. So you can hear the 4/16 notes in that second beat. Now, when you've got that firmly in your mind, then just go and count it, perhaps clap it rather than playing it, might be less confusing, and leave out that first one. So play that for you. 1 and 2. Now, if you go back and forth between the two, you could play 4 and then sometimes the 3. Leave out that first one. So just hear it in your mind or see it in your mind, but don't actually play it. So you know it's there, but it's just getting tied to that other note. I think if you do it that way, it should be quite clear, rather than trying to do it just as an isolated example of just taking those 3/16 notes. Hear the 4, and then hear how we're removing one of them, or how we're tying it to the other one. I think that'll make it much clearer. In bar 6, we have another slight variation on that. In this case, we have a half note, and it's tied to an 8th note with 2/16 notes. Now, the 8th note with the 2/16 notes should be quite clear. That would be like 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. In this case, though, that first 8th note is tied to that half note, to the G note. So the G note, because it's the half note, would get 2 beats. And then on the 3rd beat, we wouldn't play that note. That G note would still ring through. So again, if you understand the 8th note, and you can hear that, the 8th and 2/16, hear it in your mind, but tie that first one to the half note. So we'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. So it would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. So the 16th notes are played on the latter half of the 3rd beat. So in bar 6, we would have the half note for the first 2 beats tied to the 8th note on the 3rd beat, the second half of that beat on the and, 2/16 notes, and then 4 and the 2/8 notes that we have. Bar 7, we have an example similar to the first bar, the half note tied to the 8th notes. The next bar after that, bar 8, we get the half note tied to the 16th note idea. In bar 11, we have a tie which goes across the bar line. We have on the 3rd and 4th beat a half note with a tie going to the next note at the beginning of the next bar, which in this case is an 8th note. So on the 12th bar, we don't play that first beat. We have the 3rd and 4th beat ringing 3, 4, 1, and 2. So we play on the and of that bar, not on the first beat. That note just rings across the bar line. In your final bar, you'll notice again a square box, but this time on top of the line rather than below the line. You've already been introduced to the whole rest, which was a black square on the bottom of a line. This one is on the top, and it represents a half note rest. So that bar consists of a half note, 2 beats, and then 2 beats of silence. And I should mention that when you have a rest, it doesn't mean just sort of take a break. The rest should be played. It's an integral part of the music, and you should be conscious of it. You should actually try to manipulate that silence, because the composer put that silence in there for a purpose, the same way he put the note in there. He thought about it just as carefully. So when you play it, don't just let the note ring through or just generally ignore it, but pay attention to it. We have a tendency to think that because it's silence, we think it's nothing, that a coffee break or something like that. But it's not. It's very important. So listen to it. Listen to the silence and how it affects the general flow of the music itself. As I was saying, I think it would be a good idea to go through the piece first, because as you can see, it's quite complicated. Clap the rhythms, play it perhaps just on an open string, get familiar with the rhythms. What I'm going to do is play the piece for you, both parts, so you can hear how it goes. And at first, rather than trying to play along, follow the music, try to count. Or, rather than counting, you might try to clap or hum or something, but just try to follow the rhythmic ideas, try to have some understanding of it. Then, when you understand it, try to play it. So the Arioso in G by J.S. Bach. 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you can hear, it's quite complicated rhythmically. It makes a lot of use of ties, half-note rests, 16th notes, 8th notes. Also keep in mind the F sharp in the key signature. Play them all sharp. So now I'll play it again, this time just playing my part, and you can play along. 1, 2, 3, 4.